sign out here that says, I want you for VP. Me too. That's exactly what we're trying to do. But most importantly, in 31 days, starting right here in Lindale, across the entire state of Georgia, we're going to turn this state red, we're going to turn this country red, and we're going to put Donald J. Trump back in the White House. Now, we have some great people with us today. Of course, I'm biased, but most importantly, I'm thrilled to be joined by my lovely wife, Usha. Usha, thank you so much, honey, for being here. We have got another great, strong woman leader in Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. I know we're in her district. Where's Marjorie? Please say hello. Now, you may not know this, but one of the very first endorsements, and frankly the first really important endorsement that I got, was when I was running in the Republican Senate primary in Ohio a few years ago, was from Marjorie Taylor Greene. So she's been a great friend of mine. She's a loyal person. And you guys have a hell of a congresswoman here in Marjorie. We've got the great Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Burt, thank you so much, man, for being here. And you guys, we've got not just Congresswoman Greene, but you've got a great person running for Congress in the state of Georgia, Brian Jack. Brian, please say hello to everybody. Thank you, man. So one of the things that we have got to do better is that we have got to stop the crazy policies in this country that cause mills like the one that we're standing at right now to get shut down, to get closed down, and to get shipped overseas. I read a little bit about this mill, and Marjorie told me a little bit about it when I arrived. This was once, for over 100 years, a place where we made great American products with proud American craftsmanship. We made blue jeans in this factory. We made things that the United States needed, and we did it with American workers. And now this mill, and I'm so proud of the Silva family for buying it, rehabilitating it, and turning it into an event center. That's a great thing. But it should still be making great American products, and it's not because of a failure of American leadership. I mean, think of this. You can almost imagine proud American workers coming here, going to work, building a life, going back home and raising a family. And now, as I understand it, we film sometimes literal horror shows because what happened to American manufacturing was an actual horror. What we did to this nation, what we did to this proud American tradition of craftsmanship was a disgrace. And if the presidency of Donald J. Trump represents anything, my friends, and if the future presidency of Donald J. Trump represents anything, it is that we are getting back to stamping more products made in the USA. We're going to make our own stuff, and we're going to do it with American working people. Now, we got to remember that, while Kamala Harris, she runs from the media and she runs for the American people, this is a person who has the audacity to stand before the American people and say that on day one, she's going to fix the very problems that Kamala Harris created. Now, Marjorie and I haven't been in politics for long enough to be this shameless. Maybe if we've been in politics for 30 years, we could stand as the sitting vice president and tell people that we're going to do something on day one. Well, Kamala Harris, you've been vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing with all that authority the American people gave you? Get to work and stop talking about what you're going to do. Go ahead and do it. Now, and let's just talk about the record of Kamala Harris. When she was in the United States Senate and Donald Trump was undoing the terrible NAFTA trade deal that destroyed a lot of American factories, Kamala Harris was voting and fighting to preserve NAFTA. What a disgrace. This is the person who says that if we make her president, She's going to fight for working people, but when she was in the United States Senate, she stabbed working people in the back every single day, and she's going to do it again. So what is our message to Kamala Harris and to the media that's trying to install her as the next president? Our message is, Kamala Harris, you're fired. Go back to San Francisco where you belong. Let's just count the ways in which her policies have been a failure. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, you know the trade deficit in this country just topped $1 trillion. That's an incomprehensible amount of money, and thanks to Kamala Harris's leadership, we're going backwards when under Donald Trump's leadership, we were going forwards. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, the average Georgia family is spending about $1,000 more per month. That is $12,000 a year to afford today what they were buying when Donald Trump was president. Think about it. That's a tax of $12,000 a year on Georgia families. And Kamala Harris brags about how she wants to raise Americans' taxes. Well, unfortunately, she's already done it, but to the tune of about $12,000. It's a disgrace. Under Kamala Harris, groceries in the state of Georgia are up 32%. That's actually worse than it is across the country, and it's pretty damn bad across the country. Home prices are up 50% under Kamala Harris's leadership. And I know the media loves to talk about family issues, and they love to attack Republicans for not being pro-family. Well, look, the best way to be pro-family is to ensure that young American families can afford to buy a house in the greatest country on earth. And when Donald Trump is president, that's exactly what we're going to fight to make possible. The American dream of homeownership. Over 9% of credit card balances turned delinquent over the last year. That means 1 in 11 of our American families are sacrificing. They're not paying the credit card bill because they got to buy something else. Over 8% of auto loans turned delinquent. That's a lot of American families trying to make the car payment but can't afford it because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, this is a person who, when she talks to the media, and she does it like 3 times her entire campaign, but when she dares to talk to the media, she talks about how she's going to tackle the inflation crisis, the affordability crisis. My friends, the affordability crisis is on us because of Kamala Harris's failed leadership. Let's get back to the common sense leadership of Donald J. Trump. Now let's just talk about Kamala Harris's interviews for a little bit, because, you know, it's interesting. I think she is the only presidential candidate in American history where every time she opens her mouth, the other side gets about 100,000 votes. So while I criticize Kamala for not doing interviews because I think it's disgraceful to run for the American people when you're asking for their vote, I also admit I'm a little bit biased. Because I want Kamala Harris to do interviews because I think it reveals just how hollow her entire agenda is. I want Kamala Harris to do interviews because every time that she does, I think the American people see through that this is a politician, a career politician running on slogans. Donald Trump and I are running on substance for how to bring the American dream back, and that's a very different kind of campaign. You know, she says things like, well, they'll say, well, what is your specific plan to solve the inflation crisis that your policies caused? Because don't let her ever forget, my friends, $4 trillion in spending, Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote. And it's that spending that jacked up the price of food, groceries, housing, everything under her leadership. And they'll say, so what's your specific plan to solve this problem? And she'll say, well, you know, I grew up in a middle-class family. Or they'll talk about, you know, remember when Donald Trump was president, the world was at the greatest level of peace and stability it had been in a generation. Under your leadership, Kamala Harris, the world is on fire. We've got a war seemingly breaking out in every continent. What is your solution to bring peace and stability back to the world? And Kamala Harris will say, well, when I worked at McDonald's, I used to do the hash browns, and I was very good at it. And anybody with an ounce of common sense is saying, well, first of all, you're not answering the question, but second of all, Kamala, what the hell are you going to do? And the fact that you can't answer that question suggests you shouldn't be anywhere near the Oval Office, and that's exactly what we're going to make sure never happens. And look, it's not just the economic policies, because we know that Kamala Harris, every time that she makes a decision, it makes the American people worse off. Now, I was talking to Bert, the lieutenant governor, about this earlier today, and he, to his great credit, did what a leader should do. He showed up and surveyed the storm damage in the southeastern part of that state. And I know everybody here joins me in saying that our prayers are with the people recovering from these deadly, terrible storms. We're thinking about you. We're caring about you. But it's not just enough to think and care. As an American leader, it is your job to show up and do what is necessary. And here's what bothers me so much about Kamala Harris, and I think about all the things that we could criticize her on. But at the beginning of her administration, you know that she fought very hard to make sure that COVID relief money went to illegal aliens, to the tune of $1,000 per person, making sure that money went to illegal aliens. And she shows up to survey the storm damage a couple days ago, and she says that we're going to give $750 to the people suffering from these devastating storms. Well, Kamala, I think you've got it exactly the opposite. The federal government ought to give all it can to the American citizens devastated by these storms, not to illegal aliens who have no right to be here. But everything she's done as border czar, I don't know if you saw this. We had a nice debate with Tim Walz a couple days ago. I think we did pretty well. I had fun. And I'll tell you that, the people ask where my strategy came from. It actually came from President Trump, because a few weeks ago I was talking to the president. We were, shooting the breeze like we often do. And he said, "Well, what are you going to do in this debate?" And I said, "I don't know. What do you think I ought to do in this debate?" And he said, just be really tough on her. And a kind of light bulb went off. A lot of American citizens don't realize that Kamala Harris cast the tie-breaking vote to cause all this inflation, $4 trillion in new spending. And a lot of Americans don't realize that Kamala Harris was the border czar during the worst border crisis in the history of this country. And I thought, President Trump is exactly right. Why am I going to go after Tim Walz? I'm going to spend that 90 minutes and I'm going to hammer Kamala Harris on her failed record. And so that's what I did. But I saw that CBS, one of the fake journalists, 3 years ago, CBS ran a story calling Kamala Harris the border czar. And then they said, they had the audacity to say, well, J.D. Vance was missing context when he called Kamala Harris the border czar. Well, I guess CBS was missing context 3 years ago when they made the exact claim, but this is how it works, my friends. They run away from their record, because Kamala Harris's record on the border is a disgrace. On day one, they did 94 executive orders undoing Donald Trump's incredible success at the southern border. They bragged about the fact that they wanted to open the American southern border, and that's exactly what happened. And thanks to their leadership, we've got a record amount of fentanyl coming into our communities. The Mexican drug cartels are running drugs, sex trafficking, and illegal guns in our communities. And it's funny to me, Kamala Harris says that she cares about crime, but she wants to do gun grabbing from lawful American citizens. I think if you care about crime, protect the rights of American citizens to own a gun if they so choose, and take the guns away from the Mexican drug cartels, but she wants to do exactly the opposite. Doesn't make any sense. So let's just talk about the contrast here between Kamala Harris's record and Donald Trump's record, and then, of course, the vision for the future. Because, look, I came from a working-class family. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes not pay her own medical bills so that she could put food on the table. God bless you, ma'am. I see you got my book there. And I got it. And by the way, you can buy that book wherever books are sold, my friends. But Donald Trump's economic plan is very simple. When we talk about bringing back American factories, you can't do that just with words. You got to have actual action behind it. And you know how you're going to bring back American factories? Two things. Number one, drill, baby, drill. Open up American energy, produce it with American workers. And the second thing you got to do is you got to stop foreign countries from undercutting Americans with cheap labor. Now look, the Chinese Communist Party, they're more than willing to let people work at literal slave wages and then try to bring those products into the United States. That's how you close factories like the one that we're standing right next to, is you allow foreign countries to undercut the wages of American workers. You know what Donald Trump is going to do? He's going to slap a big fat tariff on everything coming in from China, because we're going to protect American workers. We're going to protect their jobs. Donald Trump wants to cut taxes for American working families and raise tariffs on the foreign countries and the foreign companies that are shipping jobs overseas. Kamala Harris wants to raise your taxes and facilitate the people who are shipping jobs overseas. I think that Donald Trump's plan makes a lot more sense, don't you? Kamala Harris wants to further open the border. She wants to grant asylum and parole to millions upon millions of illegal aliens. Donald Trump wants to build the wall and send those illegal aliens back home. They don't belong in this country. They belong in their own. And I want to send a message to everybody who's in this country illegally. While you've heard from Kamala Harris that she's going to give you free Medicare benefits and free health care benefits, she's going to give you free housing benefits paid for by American taxpayers, Donald Trump's going to win the White House. We all believe that, right? So our message to illegal aliens who are in this country without the consent of the American people is, you got 4 months, pack your bags, because you're going home. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, I couldn't believe this. I had to double check it. 425,000 illegal migrant criminals are in the United States of America. That's more than twice the size of the U.S. Marine Corps. We got some Marines out there, I'm sure. Semper Fi to the Marines. But, I think if anything, we ought to make the Marine Corps a little bit bigger and shrink the size of the illegal migrant crime population in this country. I think Kamala's got it backwards. There are over 400,000 illegal aliens in the state of Georgia. 120,000 Georgian students are the children of illegal immigrants. Think about what that does to the education of Georgia children when you drop in over 100,000 kids, many of whom don't speak English. And look, I've got all the compassion in the world for these innocent kids. We're not mad at the kids for coming into this country. We're mad at Kamala Harris for letting the Mexican drug cartels do drug trafficking and sex trafficking in the United States of America. But it's something that Kamala and her friends and Tim Walz always say. They talk about being compassionate. They talk about compassion for illegal immigrants. And look, I've got nothing against people who want to come into this country. My message is simple: come through the proper channels. But what about compassion for America's citizens? The American leadership ought to care about our people. The American president ought to put the interests of American citizens first. And if you want to have compassion for anybody, Kamala Harris, let's start with compassion for people who lost their jobs because of your policies. If you want to have compassion, let's start with compassion for people who can't afford their mortgage or their car payments because of your policies. If you want to talk about compassion, let's talk about the 100,000 Americans who are dying of fentanyl overdoses because of your policies. Compassion for the American president ought to start with the American people, and that's exactly where Donald Trump and I put our compassion. It's with our citizens and the people who deserve to be here. I want to say just a couple other things, and I know we got some press back here. I'll take a few questions, because whether they're friendly or hostile, don't you believe a person running for vice president ought to talk to the American people? Common sense. But I want to tell you a little story. So a couple weeks ago, and it feels like it was longer, but a couple weeks ago, and of course the Democrats try to lie about this and forget about it, But I was sitting at home. It was a Sunday, and it was a rare Sunday where I was just hanging out with my 7-year-old son. I get a phone call from the president. And I answer it. He says, JD, you're never going to believe what happened. I said, President Trump, what's going on? He said, they did it again. I said, what do you mean? And he said, they tried to shoot me again. And this was before it became public. It was about 1:45 in the afternoon. And he told me the story of how there was a guy hiding in the bushes who, was going to take his life. But luckily, a Secret Service agent saw the gunman. They fired at him. The gunman ran off. And, of course, Donald Trump's life was saved. And let's thank the brave Secret Service agents for doing their job. And I'll tell you, I never had a Secret Service detail, of course, in my life. I love these guys. They're doing a great job. But I've got just one complaint about the Secret Service, the guys on the ground who are protecting me and my family. I wish they would drive a little bit faster. So, gentlemen, I love you, but we don't have to drive Miss Daisy anymore. We can go faster than 62 miles per hour on the highway. I've got a bit of a lead foot myself, so being driven around by a bunch of guys who can't go over 65, it's getting to me. But look, so the president, I was kind of shaken up by it because, of course, he's my friend and he's my running mate. But most importantly, I think he's going to make a great next American president of the United States. But like any human being, I was worried about him. And so I said, well, sir, are you doing okay? I mean, clearly you're physically okay. You wouldn't be calling me, but are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm fine. I'm kind of pissed off, though. And I thought he was going to say, I'm pissed off they tried to shoot me. He said, they wouldn't let me finish playing golf. I was about to make a birdie on the 6th hole. And something struck me at that moment that as much as the Democrats lie about Donald Trump, this is a man with the character to be president of the United States. And here's what I mean by this. What you want in a president of the United States is not a person who's terrified of the American media. You want a person who's willing to sit down and take some tough questions. You don't want a person who, when a terrible tragedy, even a very traumatic thing happens to them personally, you want somebody who stands up afterwards, puts their fist in the air, and says, fight, fight, fight. You want a guy who's calm, who is calm and compassionate. You remember that moment where he nearly lost his life in Butler, PA? He called for national unity, and he called for everybody to tone down the rhetoric. And when he had gotten almost shot again on his golf course in Florida, he had the wherewithal to make some jokes and to sort of reassure his buddy that he was doing okay. That is the person you want to answer the phone when a major world crisis breaks out. That is the person you want in the situation room when times are really tough. That is the person you want calling the shots in times of peace or war. You want a man who can stand in the gap, who can literally take a bullet and keep his composure and stay who he is. That's Donald J. Trump. That's why we got to make him the next president of the United States, because we need a leader in the Oval Office, not a follower like Kamala Harris. So I want to just say, and this is a message to everybody here, but especially to those who are watching. The thing that I've picked up on is there are a lot of Americans who are worried whether the American dream is still possible anymore. And I believe that it is. I wouldn't be standing here. Think about everything that's happened in my life. I was raised by a woman who didn't graduate from high school. I was raised by my grandmother because my mom struggled with opioid addiction. And I'm standing up here in this beautiful state asking you to make me your next vice president of the United States. This is a hell of a country, my friends. Don't ever forget that. All right. Y'all gonna make me blush here. I'm already red enough. It's pretty hot out here. But look, I want to speak directly to those who are worried about whether the American dream is still possible. Because I know there are a lot of folks who can't afford their mortgage right now. There are a lot of folks worried about how they're going to pay for their prescription drugs. There are a lot of grandparents out there taking care of grandkids they weren't expecting to take care of. There are a lot of people who are struggling. under Kamala Harris's leadership. And I just want you to know that in 32 days, we're going to change the leadership of this country, and we're going to rebuild the American dream stronger than ever. Keep faith in our country, keep faith in our people, keep faith amongst ourselves, because Kamala Harris, I'm telling you, we're going to look back at Kamala Harris as a blip in the radar, as a one brief exception to the greatest American story and the greatest America that we could ever hope for. Because Kamala Harris is not big enough to take on the United States of America. The United States of America is going to fire her, send her back to California where she belongs, and give the American people a president they deserve, and it's going to start with all of you. God bless you all. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here. Now, and I know we'll take a few questions from the media. We'll keep it brief because it is hot out here. But if you're a reporter, especially a local reporter, I'd love to take your question.
Excellent.
Go ahead.
Senator, hi. Donnell Suggs with the Atlanta Voice. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about former President Trump having a third debate, a second with VP Harris, and maybe having it run like the one you just did, which seemed to focus mainly on policy and not on insults?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Kamala Harris already had an opportunity to do a second debate, and she turned it down. I really think it's important that the media gets this story right, because there was an opportunity for Kamala Harris to do a second debate, but she said she didn't want to debate on Fox News, and so that's her decision to deprive the American people of a second presidential debate. But I think you're right, actually, that our debate focused more on policy than the first presidential debate, because the moderators were a complete disgrace, and Kamala Harris doesn't know how to talk about policy, so I'm not surprised the first debate was so empty of substance. But what's interesting to me is you ask Donald Trump what he wants to do, and he will give you an answer. What does Donald Trump want to do about foreign policy? What does he want to do about Russia, Ukraine? What does he want to do about Israel, Iran? But most importantly, what does he want to do to lower prices for the American people? And he will give you an answer. The reason Donald Trump will give you an answer and Kamala Harris will give you a slogan is because Donald Trump shows leadership and Kamala Harris shows the exact opposite of it. So that is the truth of the American people. Do a couple more questions quickly.
Senator, a judge in Georgia this week struck down the state's abortion restrictions, and the Attorney General has appealed to try to get that law reinstated. Do you think that law should be reinstated?
Look, what the Georgia appeals court or a Georgia trial court, or frankly even the people of Georgia, believe about this issue is ultimately up to the people of Georgia. They got to make this decision. What President Trump and I have said repeatedly is that we want our national government to focus on the national issues, close down the border, lower the price of housing, make groceries more affordable for American citizens. We got credit card delinquencies that have skyrocketed in the last couple of weeks. We got to get an economy back that works for normal American hardworking people again, and it's a disgrace what Kamala Harris has done. But look, on the abortion question, what Donald Trump has said, he couldn't be more clear, is he wants the people of Georgia to make this decision. In the same way he wants the people of California to make the decision for the people of California. And we're a big enough country that we can agree or disagree with one another on these issues, but the national government is going to be focused on national issues, and the people of Georgia can make up their own minds, and we support the people of Georgia. Next question.
Thank you for doing this, Senator. My question for you is, what do you have to say about President Trump pushing the claim that FEMA is running out of money for her hurricane relief because of funding for programs that support migrants?
Well, let me say a couple things about this. First of all, the idea that FEMA is running out of money is something that the leadership of the Harris administration has said. That especially if there's another disaster, they've said that they might have to go back to the well. And I think a lot of Americans are saying, well, how can we afford to give billions of dollars to illegal immigrants in this country, but we've got to go back to the well to provide disaster relief for our own citizens? That's a disgrace. Now, the media's obsessed with, well, there's one bucket of money over here and there's another bucket of money over here. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that our own government is sending billions of dollars to illegal aliens when there are hardworking Americans. We got to focus on them. Focus on our American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by these terrible storms. That's what Kamala Harris ought to be doing, and it's a damn shame that she's not doing her job.
Hi, Senator. Thank you for doing this. President Trump often describes the 2020 election as rigged, and he often uses the term to describe what he sees as fraud in that election. Trump said that again yesterday at a rally in Michigan. Senator, would you use that specific term, rigged? You have said in the past you have concerns about election integrity in the past and going forward, and do you concur with the president that the 2020 election was rigged?
Well, look, So I'm from Ohio. I'm not from the South, but I think in the South there's a phrase that really works. Bless your heart. Look, man. First of all, we're focused on the future in this election and in this campaign. If you look at what President Trump says, what I say, we are focused on the future. Every single day, hardworking Americans are suffering because of Kamala Harris's policies. It is a disaster, and I think it's interesting that the American media wants to talk so much about 2020. And the reason they want to talk about 2020 is because they don't want to talk a lick about what happened afterwards. And what happened afterwards is that Kamala Harris opened the border, jacked up the price of food, jacked up the price of housing, and American citizens are suffering from it. It is a disgrace. From the Harris campaign and for the American media, we ought to talk about her failed record, and that's what Donald Trump and I are going to keep on doing. Now, you asked the question, and I believe that it's important to answer the question. Let me just tell you one thing that even the liberal media has said happened in 2020. There was a bombshell story that suggested the Biden family had some very corrupt business dealings with some foreign countries. It was all in the infamous Hunter Biden laptop. That happened in 2020. Now, the media, the big tech companies censored that story. And independent people have said that probably cost Donald Trump hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of votes. Now, I don't care what you call that, but it's a damn shame and we can't accept it in our country. You want to call that rigged? Call it whatever you want to. It's unacceptable to happen in the world's greatest constitutional republic. I see another hand. I'll do one more, and then we'll have to hit the road.
Thanks, Senator. It's Kip Maher again. I wanted to ask you, in Melania Trump's book, she voices support for abortion rights. Does that impact the way that you see this issue? And what state, among all the states, do you think has the best abortion policy in your view? And then quickly, if you could have a comment on Trump and Kemp meeting for the first time since 2020 today.
Yeah, so there was a lot there. Let me first briefly. I think Brian Kemp. I understand that he and the president have had some disagreements in the past, but they're on the same team to defeat Kamala Harris, and that's a very good thing. And all of us, whatever part of the Republican Party we came from, the primary is over. Let's get on the same team and bring common sense governance back to the American people. I'm glad to have Brian Kemp on that team. I'm thrilled to have, of course, Donald Trump on that team. I'm thrilled to have Bobby Kennedy on that team because the American people are sick of the BS. And by the way, I've been asked by some folks about, to comment on Liz Cheney. I think we just traded Liz Cheney for Tulsi Gabbard. That's the biggest upgrade in American politics, and I'm awfully happy about it. Now, you asked about the First Lady's abortion views. Look, I love Melania. I think she's a great wife to the president. She's been I think a great example of grace under an incredible amount of pressure. But Melania is entitled to her own views in the same way the people of Georgia are entitled to their own views. And I don't believe I have to attack or disagree or criticize anybody on this issue because our campaign is focused, again, on inflation, on securing the border, on making life more affordable, on bringing good jobs to the state of Georgia and the whole country. So, look, I mean, I think she's a smart person. I think she's going to express her views. She's entitled to do it. But it doesn't change how I talk about this issue or how the campaign talks about the issue. And then the final point I want to make here, just because I know that we're running short on time, and I want to look at my notes here because I want to make sure I get this website right. Write this all down if you can. SwampTheVoteUSA.com. SwampTheVoteUSA.com. Okay? I want you all to go to this website because here's the thing. We're never going to have the dishonest press. We're never going to have, of course, the Democrats telling the truth. But what we do have is people power in the United States of America. We have got the ability to get out there and person to person make our voices heard, but it's not going to happen unless we get out there and vote. Georgia has made some serious progress. Y'all passed a very common sense voter ID measure a few years ago. You remember that? By the way, speaking of Brian Kemp, thank you for signing that legislation. But I think we have an opportunity in the state of Georgia to not just win, but to win in a very big way. So what I'm going to ask you to do, and please take this to heart, is get out there, not just get yourself to the polls, whether you're voting early, voting by mail, or voting on Election Day, try to get 9 people. If every single person gets 9 people to join them at the polls, I think that we are going to have a crushing victory in the state of Georgia, and we're going to make this country great again. So please, please remember, we're not just running this race because it's going to be fun to beat the Democrats, but it is going to be fun to beat the Democrats. My friends, trust me, I'm going to enjoy that. We're running this race because the American people have been failed by their government, and that has got to change. I want you all to see yourselves as fighters, as warriors, to give the great American people the government they deserve. They're not going to get it unless we get out there and vote and make Donald Trump the next president of the United States. Do your part. I'll keep doing mine. God bless you all. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.